Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Fill Up Podcast. I'm really excited for our guest today. We have Jeannie Armbruster from Your Truest You, and she is an amazing coach and friend, and you're going to hear all about her story today. So, without further ado,
Thank you. Thanks. It's so fun to be here with you. Richard and I have known each other now for a year. It's been a year since we've known each other and started out in a retreat together and then have become dear colleagues and friends over the course of the year. And so it's so fun to be here with you.
yeah, super excited. Tell people where you came from. What has brought you to using Enneagram? What is Enneagram? A little bit, just so our audience knows.
Sure. So I'll start with Enneagram first, just so there's a context for the rest of it. The Enneagram is a system of personality that talks about 9 different personality types. We each have one as our home base in life. And it kind of sets up an understanding of our core motivations, our fears, what our focus of attention is on, what we miss. And most people have done, if not many different kinds of personality evaluations, and they know all these little bits and pieces. But the Enneagram is really profound in that it gets at why you do what you do. And once we have an understanding of the why, we can actually start to work with it and change it. A lot of systems, you walk away and like pat yourself on the back in some areas and think, oh, I'm not so good at that. But this actually gives you something to work with and realize like there's a path of growth within it. It's great for everything from career development to spiritual growth. And that's kind of how I use it in my business that I do. A little bit of, yeah.
Can I just interject into that too? One of the things that, as you've taught and shared with me about Enneagram, one of the things that I love is it really is all about your natural tendencies. Like these are the spots where you feel comfortable. These are the spots where you might naturally find challenges. And just knowing those is such an awareness builder to be able to manage certain situations, understanding how I might show up in these situations rather than going in blind. Right. And experiencing something that is very stressful for who I am at the core.
Yeah.
And to get there, I also found that you have to strip away some layers to really understand that, oh, that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when I work with clients, they'll talk about like some of their big core issues within their type, and they'll be like, I'm working on it. I think I almost have it. And it's like, oh, sweetheart, like you're going to have that for the rest of your life. It's just a matter of awareness and managing it. It's not a problem that you have it, but some of the things that are hardwired into us, it's the idea is that it's based on our strengths, who we were created to be, the gifts that we've come into life to offer. But then in our overwhelm in childhood, in just trying to survive and make a life, we tend to overuse those strengths. And when we overuse them, then we start to create suffering for ourselves and for the people around us. So if you're helpful and giving, that's a tremendous gift. But when you're helping people that aren't interested in being helped, well, now we've got a rub and a conflict. Or for somebody who's a peacemaker, Richard identifies as a peacemaker. That's incredible. And we love peacemakers. We love people that come into a space and just are easy and go with the flow. But there are things that, like when boundaries come up, the peacemaker can't just use peace to get to what they need to do for themselves or to set those appropriate boundaries. So it's the process of learning, like, this is a strength, but my overuse of it is actually not serving me, keeping me stuck.
And believe me, as peacemakers, we try to use that peacemaking quality to find its resolution. One of the most frustrating times is when you can't see a way through a solution by using that.
Yeah.
And that's where, like you've talked so many times before, you got to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
And take a step back, either give it to somebody else or just allow things to unfold.
Yeah.
Which is really, really hard when it's against your nature.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. For all of us in our 9 different ways. Yeah. Absolutely.
What brought you to this point so that you're doing this now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm going to say I'll give you the short version, but who knows? I might end up giving you the long version just because I'll get talking and I'll just keep going. So, I grew up in the Christian tradition and within the Lutheran Church. And when I look back at it, I feel like most of that experience in terms of what was offered was kind of like we're good citizens and we're Christians. And they all kind of fell into the same bucket in terms of like, it shapes your behaviors, it shapes your loyalties, but it wasn't like a personal, deep, profound relationship being offered in the context of how I grew up in it. But somehow, even in that, I always have had just a deep sense of connection to God. And I was confused by a lot of the adults in that space as to like why there wasn't more feeling or more obvious um like I remember there was a homeless man in the parking lot of our church, and I remember being little and all of the men in suits were talking about the man's making people really uncomfortable parking. Somebody should go and ask him to leave. And I just remember being a little kid and thinking, what the heck, like shouldn't we invite him inside? Like what I'm pretty sure like little flannel board Jesus last week taught us we should love like the
Yeah.
disenfranchised, like
Feed the
so.
hungry, clothe the naked.
Right.
Yeah.
Or ask them to
Yeah.
leave because it's really uncomfortable when we're parking our nice cars and right, right. Um, in high school though, I ended up having some youth leaders that really had just a deep passion for spiritual growth, for knowing God, and that is a space where I just came alive. I've been teaching as long as I've been alive. Like when I was like in middle school, I was teaching preschool Sunday school. And when I was in high school, I was teaching middle school and on and on and on. And so I ended up doing a lot of youth ministry stuff for the church in my early 20s. And then as part of that, a pastor had come from the East Coast out here in Philadelphia. I grew up in Southern California. And he and his wife were going to come back to the East Coast to plant a church. And I thought, oh, I'll go do that for a year and live in Philadelphia for a year and have that experience. And now, 20, gosh, what is it, like 25 years later, I'm still here.
1 year,
Yep.
hey?
Yeah. Got a job that I loved working for Big Brothers Big Sisters as a social worker, doing pregnancy prevention with young folks. And then I met my husband and then had babies and then convinced my parents to move out here. So here I am in Philadelphia, probably for a couple more years at least until my kids are moved on from here.
So, according to that scale, 1 year equals 25. So, another 50 years, a couple more years.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as far as the Enneagram goes, I'm an Enneagram type 7, and we're a type that's enthusiastic, and we use excitement and fascination and ideas to keep ourselves kind of feeling up and lifted and good. And in the process of all of that, we tend to avoid feeling sad, feeling hurt, feeling angry, any of those uncomfortable emotions. Our goal is to get out of them as quick as possible and back up to something that we deem more positive or more fun to be. Um, and so the way we do that is we just keep our minds super activated with what's next, what's exciting, what's fun. And so when my kids, I was a stay at home mom for a season. And when my kids both were in school full time, I couldn't spin my mind fast enough. And like this deep well of anxiety kind of rose up and overtook me and was in a season of really profound anxiety. And it was
Jeannie, how
uncomfortable.
long ago? How long ago was this? Like, when did it start?
Gosh, I'm bad with time. So 2016.
Okay,
And
so
now
about
it's,
8 years ago,
yeah.
somewhere around there.
Yep.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I just couldn't spin myself fast enough. And so it wasn't just like current anxiety I was experiencing, it was like a
Mm.
well of anxiety that I had been delaying and putting off and avoiding for years. I didn't know the Enneagram at that time. And so I was doing all of the things that were offered to me within my church in terms of pray more. Here's 101 verses on do not fear, and all of that. And so when you've exhausted all of that and you're still consumed with anxiety, It was frustrating. It was isolating. And there tends to be the sense like, well, I'm doing it wrong. If I would just do it right, then I could get out of this. If I would just have more faith. But it wasn't any of those issues. It was just a complete overwhelm in my system that I wasn't able to get out of. In that
Hmm.
season, I listened to a podcast sermon and they talked about the Enneagram. And I thought, this is something new for my brain to think about. Maybe this will help. So I got all interested in the Enneagram. And as I started reading the book and finding out what type I am, it was really evident pretty quickly that I'm a type 7, the enthusiast. And that's a head type. And the core underlying emotion is anxiety. So all of a sudden, there was a logic to why I was feeling what I was feeling, which made it not so overwhelming for me as a head type. Just knowing that I'm not just losing it, that there's actually a reason for it, made it feel like, oh, if there's a reason for it, there's something that I can do with that in order to kind of bring healing and restoration. And so that began my journey of deeply learning the Enneagram, wanting to share it with other people as a resource, and have worked my way out of anxiety. Um, I will say I will probably have anxiety for the rest of my life within my type structure. But now, what used to, like, I would feel a release of anxiety in my body and just think, oh, this is going to be days. I'm going to get stuck here for days because I can just feel it on a chemical level in my body. And now I can metabolize that same feeling in the matter of minutes most of the time. So it's not that I don't have but it's now like an ability to resource myself in ways that I didn't have any understanding of before.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I've found the same way since you've introduced me and helped me to understand my type a little bit better too. So for the listeners out here, I'm a type 9. Jeannie's a type 7, and the 9's the underlying emotion, like how she talked about anxiety. For 9's, it's anger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of funny. Not to take away from your story, but just a really quick aside. When my wife and I were first married, I she I don't even remember how this exactly came up, but she had a conversation with my mom, and my mom had said, Richard's really calm and stuff, but he can get angry
Yeah.
too sometimes, and which is totally a type 9. So thinking back on this now, it's so clear, right? That 9's just bottle it until it's like an exploding volcano, and then it's gone, and then you're apologizing to everybody for 5 days, or maybe not quite that long. That's an exaggeration. But she was told that, and she let me know, and I was like, that really bothered me. Like, it just
Yeah.
really, really bothered me that that I was labeled as an angry person,
Yeah.
or that was said. And I've since had a conversation with my mom. She might listen to this episode, and so
Hi, Mom.
yeah, hopefully there's nothing here that's embarrassing for her. I'm trying to be vulnerable too. But we had a chat about it, and she's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said it, but in the end, I think she should have, because
Yeah.
it was true, and it was
Yeah.
a clearer picture. And who knows us better than our moms do?
Right. Right. It is funny. One of the things that in the Enneagram world we talk about is if you're trying to decide on which type you are, it's probably the one that makes you cringe the most. Like, like in terms of like when we see ourselves so clearly, we're like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want people to see me like that. And the reality is other people already do. Your mom was already aware of like, wow, there's this anger that sits under all of this nice, calm, wonderful, warm
Mm-hmm.
part of you. But the anger is there with you. And for me, my avoidance of being with things that are sad, and like the second people share any kind of like hard thing, the 7 reframes it and tries to offer you, well, the good thing about that is, and I
Yeah.
didn't know that people didn't appreciate that. I had no, because I am like, thank God you got me out of feeling bad. Yes. But for other people, it feels so dismissive. It's toxic positivity is the language that's used for it. And I had no idea. I was offering my best tool that helps me feel better within my type structure, and only to find out that that's not actually serving people of other types, nor is it really truly serving me at the end of the day. And so having to do some of that work to like get into my body. As a head type, I live all the way up in my head, and I literally used to feel like a head on a stick. Like I didn't even know I had a body beneath my head. It's just the thing that carries my head around. And a really wise teacher within the Enneagram said, you need to get in your body to develop a holding capacity for all of your emotions. You can't just have your emotions in your head. There's nothing there to resource you. You have to drop down into your body. And so I would try, you do these meditations where you breathe in through your nose and try to get the breath down into your body. And I remember opening my eyes in class and looking at people thinking, are people doing this? Do you guys have access to like breathing into your body? I don't even know what that means. Like I couldn't get my breath past my chin for like 6 months.
Wow.
It was that cut off.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened when you did? When you finally did get it down there?
Yeah, both. Two things happened. One, I gained tremendous resource. And then at the same time, I also gained access to a lot of things that I've stored in my body that I've been holding and not feeling. And so fortunately, with the increase of resource, I have the capacity to be with some of these hard things. I had to grieve things that I skipped. And Richard does these incredible things called breakthrough sessions. And one of the things that you work with is hurt. I was really good at sadness. I was really good at anger. And then he said hurt. And I'm like, I'm not quite, what is hurt? Like, I don't know what that means. And you had to explain to me what it is to feel hurt. And as soon as you did, I got it. But my type structure screens that out so fast. No, I'm not hurt. I'm okay. I'm okay. And so I've had to get into touch with a lot of those things.
Oh man, I don't remember having to do that with
You don't
you.
remember?
No.
I'm so embarrassed. Like here I am doing this work and helping other people in it. And there's still like these blind spots for me that come up and are just like, oh gosh, I feel like I've done so much work. And yet there's these pieces of ourselves that are still revealing themselves and evolving. And that coming to understand that's just part of the journey. And that will be for the rest of my life. There will be pieces that I'm like, oh, I thought I had done this. And here it is again. Okay. Yeah.
That's really is the beauty of it. I believe.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel beautiful at the time that you recognize it. It feels very vulnerable, which is also another thing for your type, right? That is, it's a little bit of a type. The vulnerability, you transmute that into positivity.
Yeah.
Or
reframe
reframe it.
that struggle with vulnerability, it's because the belief at the core of the type is I'm on my own in this. Like there isn't a sense that other people are going to show up for me or be in it with me. So to be vulnerable feels unsurvivable because I'm alone in it. And if I'm vulnerable, there is no expectation that someone's going to step in and meet me in it. I'm just going to be vulnerable and on my own. And that's for several of the types have that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to here's Jeannie 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Read these scripture passages more, pray more, not working. There's got to be something more. Introduced to Enneagram, learning that you can actually breathe into your body. Give us some snippets of what was going on within you during that transformational period of your life, and just help to bring us up to where you're at now.
Yeah, it's been a painful journey, quite honestly. Like in terms of one of my teachers, Marianne Gilbert, says it's the unpopular proposition. It's choosing to go into all of these things that we've spent our lives working to avoid. And so it has been a process where the pendulum swung too far in self-awareness, where it went from like, I wasn't self-aware to then I was like painfully critical of myself and seeing it everywhere and second guessing myself and even like tamping down my gifting because of fear of like, oh, but what if I think that's a gift, but other people don't think that's a gift and I just don't know it yet. And so it's been a difficult process to go through. And I think there's incredible wisdom in the saying, like the Enneagram is solitary work that you can't do alone. You need a community, you need other people to do it with you, because you need those tethers outside of you to say, no, actually, that is a gift and we do love it.
Mhm.
When you're overcorrecting some of the things you become self aware about.
You've been really vulnerable, which I want to just acknowledge. And
It's getting easier.
for, yeah, which is awesome. So thank you. So some of that, some of what you've had to do going through and doing your own work, do you have any specific stories that you're willing to share with the audience here about
Specific stories about what? Yep.
about doing the work? Some of the other things that you found that have helped you to transform, and then also what made you want to be a coach and to do this as well, to be able to help other people.
Yeah. Specific stories. I think one of the biggest spaces of learning is as a parent, because it like there's nothing that matters more to me than being a great mom to my kids. And in all of our type structures, we naturally teach our kids our type's best strategy for how to be okay in the world. And if they're a different type, it doesn't land for them the way that it lands for us. They need a different strategy. And so, in learning the Enneagram and learning that I tend to reframe everything to the positive and try to get my kids, like anytime my kids were sad, angry, feeling injustice, my first defense was always like, well, the good thing about it is, like, oh, you didn't get invited to the party. Well, the good thing about it is now this Saturday we can go and do this really fun thing and it'll be great. Like just skipping it. Um, and for each of the types, there's a fear of each of the types. And seven's biggest fear is being trapped alone in pain and suffering. And when it connected for me that this strategy that I'm using to cheer my kids up when they're sad actually leaves them alone in their pain and suffering because I can't
Ooh,
be with it devastated me. Because that's the last thing as a mom that cares about my kids, like that's my biggest nightmare. And now I'm creating that. And we all do that within our type structure. The thing that we're most trying to avoid, we end up creating in ways that affect the people around us. Um, and so that was really huge. And I asked them, they were in early elementary school, and they were like, yeah, it feels like you can't be with us in it. And finding out that what they needed was just somebody to listen and to say like, oh, that's so hard. And just being with it and not needing to do anything with it. Just creating a space where they feel safe and loved and like they're okay in it, even though it's hard and sad, but they're not alone in it. Um, and then in my marriage, there, like I have a fantastic marriage. I love my husband so much, and yet because of our different personalities, there's going to be natural places where we miss each other and have conflicts. And there were things that I used to take so personally that once I learned his type, or once I learned more about how my type functioned, the whole story about it being personal just drops, and you realize, oh, it's just his strategy and my strategy and they're not matching here. But that's not him
mm,
against me or me against him. That's, we're both trying to get our needs met in very, very different ways. So that has been a beautiful journey. That's been really hard. Like there's things like sevens, when we're partnering with someone in conversation, we tend to get excited and we overtalk you as a form of what we think is support. Turns out you guys don't think that's supportive. You think it's really rude. Um, so like just having to like watch myself and giving my husband permission every time I interrupt you, I want you to point it out to me. And we go for like a 2-mile walk together every morning. And man, the first week I gave him permission to point it out, it was shameful, embarrassing, awful, that it was like so just wired into how I communicate.
yeah.
And so having to watch that and release that and relax it, and own it when I mess up are just some of the ways. Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
comfortable now? Is it more comfortable?
My ego is much less invested in thinking that I'm above it than it used to be. So it's more just like, oh, yep, there it is again. Of course, of course, of course. And I am truly sorry. And um, I have become beautifully and painfully aware of that idea of me being really great and good and perfect. Like I've had to let go of that. And at the same time, I am still really good and great and perfect, but it's not in the ways that I thought that I was. It's not in all of the striving and the efforting and the things that I thought were making that so. There's a space of vulnerability and authenticity and honesty that sits behind all of that. That's our true essence. Um, so I'm less shamed when my image gets dinged now, and actually have like a moment of like, oh, okay, there's that to work on. Okay. Whereas I used to hold it with a lot more shame than I do now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. That's cool. So what, so now you're a coach and you do
Yeah.
Enneagram typing with people and help them to work through
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you've been talking about.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do that, to become that coach
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just tell us a little bit about your practice?
Sure, sure. So with everything in life that I get excited about, I want everybody to know about it before I've even finished reading the first book on it. So I was like, as soon as I read the first book, I would host dinner parties for the Enneagram at my house and start teaching the Enneagram. Um, and part of that is sevens move on really fast to different things. And so there's that like, teach it while you can, because next month you're going to be excited about something else and you're not even going to remember that you did this. Um, but the Enneagram is one of the first things that I really landed with and stayed with and deeply sought to learn and understand. And so just seeing the power that it had to transform how I parent, to transform my marriage, um, it became something that I wanted to become really skilled at teaching, not just flippantly teaching, but really like on a deeper level. It also gets at the things that create disrupt in our relationship with others are also the things that create disrupt in our relationship with God. And so it's a pathway into some really deep, beautiful spiritual work,
Mhm.
and understanding who you are at the core of your being and the beauty with which you were created. And so wanting to create a space where I can offer that to people. So I've been trained in the Enneagram narrative tradition, and I've also done trainings with corporate trainers, and I've done probably about 500 hours worth of Enneagram training in classrooms and then internships and all of that. But the work that I do is I help people discover what type they are. And then my favorite is then doing some of the deeper work where we work with it within the context of how you hold your personality in your body. It's called somatic practicing with the Enneagram. And that's where truly profound, beautiful moments happen. I was just working with a client yesterday who said she's spent a lot of her life studying, like being in the present moment and Eckhart Tolle
Mhm.
and all of that. And the somatic practice we did yesterday, she said was the first time she actually experienced totally being in the present moment.
Wow.
Um, so I get to like witness and hold space for people on their journeys to do this incredible work. And it's life changing for them, it's life changing for me. And then I also offer the Enneagram in corporate spaces where I go in and work with teams around the idea that I don't get caught up the way you get caught up in your type in the ways that are frustrating and annoying. I don't do it the way you do it, but I know what it's like to get caught up in my own type structure and to just be on autopilot. Um, and so, working with teams to create compassion on the team for understanding the various perspectives, as well as utilizing all of the perspectives at the table. Some of the types are more assertive and they take up more of the space, when some of those withdrawing folks are very observant and very thoughtful, but there's no space in a 20-minute meeting for them to share that. So how can you create an environment where you're able to access the gifting of each of the players on your team in a really profound and beautiful way? So that's
Mhm.
some of the work that I do.
I love it. I love it. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to be able to do some of this work,
Mhm.
and by the way, it is amazing
Aw,
because Jeannie said she's done a breakthrough with me. I have done some of this work with her, and it is as awareness building, which is one of the greatest powers we can have, is to build that awareness about ourselves. But one of the gifts that I received about it too is also falling in love, like learning to just love who I am and
Mm,
give myself that grace. And I
yeah.
think that's one of the great powers and special gifts that you bring through your work to people as well.
Thank you.
So let me finish that question. How can people get in touch with you if
Yeah.
they wanted
My
to explore more?
Sure. My website is yourtruestyou.com, yourtruestyou, yourtruestyou.com. And you can reach me through that.
Awesome.
I don't do social media. I get told all the time, you need to do social media. And I have just found that my business is unfolding in like a really beautiful, natural pace. And that I am spending more time developing my craft than trying to market myself, and trusting that that will continue to unfold the way that it has been. So I don't have social media, guys. Sorry.
I don't think that's a problem. You still have all the needed technology. Um, so I always like to end with advice. What's one piece of advice that you would give people to being their truest self? You know, your business is named Your Truest You.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice that you would give them? You'd like to leave our audience today?
Yeah, I think one of the most helpful pieces for me in learning the Enneagram is that three of the types are dominant head types, three of the types are dominant heart types, and three of the types are dominant body types that kind of sense the world and react from sensations. Um, but that we all have all three of those, and we overuse one, we sort of use the other, and then one falls off of our screen of awareness. And so learning that about yourself, where you're overusing and underusing these places of tremendous wisdom and resource, so that you can bring them into alignment. Um, and like, as me as a head type, and my heart space is my least developed. So learning how to bring my heart into decision making, learning how to bring my heart into when I'm giving someone advice, like a friend calls and asks me for something. I used to just give head advice, and now it's like slowing down and trying to like feel what they're
Mm.
actually trying to communicate, rather than just jumping into data and knowledge and wisdom from my head. I think that that has been incredibly powerful. And then also just know that the people out there that are driving you crazy are just trying to do their best job to survive and stay out of their own overwhelm. And as much as possible, starting to lend compassion to others, which we only have as much compassion for others as we have for ourselves. So working to develop self-compassion.